Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're diving deep, really deep, into a world that's usually hidden, high stakes, incredibly data-driven. We're talking about where longevity science, our own genetics, and the pretty stark realities of the life insurance industry all crash together.
That's a great way to put it. And look, this isn't just abstract theory we're batting around today. The goal is really to cut through all that noise. The random supplement advice everyone seems to be giving. We want to tackle those really common, frankly frustrating health issues, that brain fog that just won't lift, maybe holding onto water for no reason, or that general feeling of anxiety humming underneath everything. And the data is showing these often share a common overlooked source: nutrient deficiencies. But not just any deficiencies, ones tied directly to your specific genetics, how you process the basic stuff you eat.
And yeah, to really ground this whole conversation, we have to start with something pretty unsettling, maybe even a bit shocking. It's a truth that's been revealed by decades of actuarial science, the math behind insurance. We're actually going to talk about what the life insurance industry knows about when you might die, why they are so incredibly accurate at predicting it, sometimes down to the month, and, well, what happens when that cold, hard science bumps up against real human lives.
Yeah, to give you some context, I spent 2 decades completely immersed in that world. My entire career, basically, was inside the life insurance industry, specifically leading what we called mortality teams. And when you say high stakes, believe me, it was. We were predicting life expectancy for policies. Huge policies. 10 million, 20 million, sometimes even $50 million of financial risk riding on our predictions. The accuracy, it had to be, near perfect. There was just no room for error.
Wow. I mean, with that kind of capital on the line, the science can't just be good. It has to be more robust than, say, standard medical research, right? So what was the absolute core question driving every single decision your team had to make?
For anything permanent, universal life, whole life insurance, or even those specialized annuity products, honestly, only one thing truly mattered when it came to underwriting and pricing that policy. Just one question. How many more months does this applicant have left on Earth? The company's profitability, its ability to stay solvent, its power to hedge against massive risk, it all hung on how accurately we could predict that single number. Everything else was secondary.
And the evidence that this isn't just theory, that the science works, is kind of mind-blowing, especially, like you said, when you compare it to the rest of the financial world. You mentioned that analogy from the source material about the 2008 financial crisis.
Right. It's the ultimate stress test, isn't it? Think back to 2008, 2009, that massive financial services meltdown in the U.S. You had, 364 banks fail across the country? Banks that supposedly had these sophisticated risk models. And yet, not a single major life insurance company failed to pay out on a valid death claim. Not one.
Why? How?
Because they're legally required to hold huge cash reserves based on their calculated mortality risk. They're unbelievably solvent institutions, some of the most stable in the world.
Yeah.
And the reason is simple. Their proprietary science, their models for predicting when people will die, are frighteningly mathematically accurate.
And that accuracy comes down to having data nobody else has, right? Not even major health organizations.
That's the absolute key difference. Life insurance companies have death data. It's inaccessible to medical researchers, universities, even government bodies like the CDC or NIH. We're talking the exact day, date, time, location, and critically, the cause of death for millions and millions of people going back decades. This massive unfiltered pool of data lets the actuaries see the precise causal chains, the correlations that lead directly to dying early, with a level of precision that medical research, which often focuses on just one disease at a time, simply can't replicate.
Okay, so let's break down how the prediction actually works. You mentioned starting everyone on an actuarial curve, like a baseline.
Exactly. You start with the assumption that the applicant is perfectly average for their group. We place them on an actuarial curve, which is basically a statistical pool of maybe 1,000 other lives who share the same basic demographics: age, gender, non-smoker, things like that. Their initial life expectancy is slap bang in the middle of that curve. So if we predict, say, you have 200 months left, it means statistically you have the exact same chance of being dead as you do of being alive at the end of those 200 months. That's square one.
Okay, and then the individual stuff starts to matter, applying the debits, you called it, factoring in blood work, habit.
Right. Then we use the most comprehensive data we can get to adjust that starting point, to slide you along the curve. This means meticulous analysis of blood tests, lipids, blood sugar, inflammation markers, detailed demographic profiles, recreational habits, smoking, drinking, dangerous hobbies. Family history plays a role. Even compliance with current medications. Every negative factor may be an elevated lipid panel. Poor blood sugar control, a history of smoking acts as a debit. It shifts the applicant further down that mortality curve, shortening their predicted timeline.
And the really scary part, based on what you're saying, is the math around comorbidities, having multiple conditions. It's not linear. It's, well, you called it 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 risk. How does that compounding effect work?
It's all about the synergistic effect, how these things feed off each other, mainly through chronic inflammation and just systemic wear and tear. So, okay, let's say you were hypertensive, high blood pressure. That might represent on its own maybe a 1x increase in mortality risk in our models. Then maybe you were diagnosed diabetic. That's another 1x increase. And perhaps you were also clinically obese. That's a third 1x increase. Now, a typical doctor might look at those as 3 separate problems to manage.
Right. Treat the blood pressure, manage the diabetes, advise weight loss.
Exactly. But our data, looking at millions of lives, showed something starkly different. If you had all 3, hypertension, diabetes, and obesity, the total risk wasn't additive. It wasn't 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It was multiplicative. It jumped to maybe a 10x, even a 12x acceleration of predicted mortality.
Wow.
These 3 conditions together just drive systemic inflammation through the roof, and that stacking effect exponentially shortens the actual human timeline dramatically.
It sounds like you were watching these timelines shrink in real time, seeing the data predict a fate that the person themselves probably had no idea was so close. That must have created a huge strain, not just intellectually, but personally. You weren't just looking at data points anymore.
That's the part that honestly changed my life. Because you're right, it wasn't just spreadsheets. I was reading thousands upon thousands of personal medical records. And not just the medical stuff, but comprehensive profiles. We'd see their trusts, their wills, sometimes divorce decrees, bank account summaries, alongside years and years of detailed medical history from multiple doctors. You genuinely start to build this holistic, almost intimate picture of this human being who is, still walking around, living their life, completely unaware we're calculating their final months.
You shared that really poignant anecdote about watching a life unfold in the records and then seeing the timeline shift drastically after one specific emotional event.
Yeah, and it was startlingly common. You'd follow a patient's file, regular doctor visits, notes about their golf game, mentions of grandkids, pretty normal stuff. Then bang, an entry noting the death of their spouse. And almost immediately, in the subsequent records, you'd see the first prescription for an antidepressant. Right alongside that, you'd see a noticeable, clearly correlating change in their BMI, their hemoglobin A1C, their inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. The data was just crystal clear. An emotional trauma, a deep psychological wound, had become a measurable physiological reality. And it was accelerating their mortality timeline, sometimes shaving off months, even years from our predictions. They stopped being just risk variables on a curve. They became these complex, breathing human beings whose final moments we were trying to pin down with math.
And realizing that seeing the human cost led directly to what you called the glass wall, that profound ethical dilemma.
The glass wall.
Yeah.
That was single-handedly the most painful, most isolating part of my entire professional life. Because we were legally strictly prohibited from contacting these patients, ever. But sometimes, because we had this unique 360-degree view of their entire health profile over years' data, their own primary care doctor, working in their own silo, probably didn't have access to their Henry. We would spot something glaring, something life-threatening.
Can you give a concrete example? How did that systemic gap play out?
The classic and unfortunately common example involved contraindicated prescriptions, drug interactions. We'd see a patient file where they're going to 2 different specialists, let's say a cardiologist for heart issues and maybe a pain management doctor for chronic back pain. Each doctor, acting perfectly reasonably within their specialty, would prescribe a medication. But when you looked at both scripts together, our massive data set built on millions of outcomes would flag a dangerous interaction. It would predict a high probability based on statistical precedent of a massive thrombotic event, a major stroke, a heart attack, sometimes within the next, say, 18 months.
So you had the data showing this person was essentially walking towards a cliff, medically speaking, and you couldn't warn them.
Legally gagged. Completely. It felt like I was sitting behind this thick, soundproof pane of glass. And on the other side, I could see these people, metaphorically blind, just walking straight into oncoming traffic. And I could scream, I could bang on the glass. But no sound got through. I couldn't warn them.
No.
I actually threatened once. I seriously considered calling a patient directly to warn them about a potentially fatal drug interaction we saw coming.
What happened?
I was immediately read the riot act, threatened with prosecution, losing my licenses, financial ruin. The legal barriers were absolute. That feeling of utter helplessness, knowing you possess information that could potentially save or drastically change the course of a human life with just a simple phone call, but being legally chained, that's ultimately what drove me out. I had to resign. I couldn't live with it. I decided I had to dedicate my life to service, to countering those deadly patterns we saw in the research by getting preventative knowledge out there before it becomes a death statistic.
That transition, moving from predicting death to actively trying to prevent it, leads us right into this next big question: optimization. If the data is so clear on what shortens life, why are so many of us, even people who feel generally okay, just not functioning at our best? We're dealing with brain fog, low energy, anxiety. You use that really powerful analogy of the rotting palm leaf.
Yeah, it really comes down to rediscovering what I think is a lost art of healing. It's about perspective. Think about it. If you have a palm tree in your yard and one leaf starts yellowing or rotting, what does a true botanist or arborist do? They don't just spray the leaf with fungicide or, paint it green to hide the problem. No, they take a core sample of the soil around the roots. And almost invariably, they find a core deficiency in the soil itself. Maybe it's lacking nitrogen or magnesium or potassium. So what do? They add that missing element back to the soil. And then magically, the leaf heals itself using its own built-in repair mechanisms. We've completely lost that perspective with the human body. We tend to think disease is something happening to us, some external invader. But so often, the data shows it's actually happening within us. It's a fundamental lack of the basic raw materials our cells need to function optimally, to repair damage, to thrive.
And this flawed perspective leads directly into that huge issue you mentioned, the supplement trap, what you call the paralysis of analysis. People are just drowning in options.
Exactly right. You go on social media, you read an article, someone says NMN is the hot new longevity molecule. Then someone else says resveratrol is crucial for antioxidants. Oh, and don't forget CoQ10 for your heart and ashwagandha for stress. Vitamin C is essential. People feel overwhelmed, like they have to take everything, and they end up just supplementing for the sake of supplementing, often spending hundreds, even thousands of dollars a month without any actual data on what their body specifically needs. But look, if that palm tree soil is missing nitrogen, you can pour all the fancy, expensive, high-tech fertilizers you want onto the leaves, but that leaf is never going to heal properly. You absolutely have to find and fix the core deficiency first. You have to identify the missing raw material that's causing the system to malfunction.
And this whole behavior pattern is made worse by what you identified as the data disconnect. We're so analytical about business, but completely in the dark about our own most important metrics.
It's truly astounding when you stop and think about it. Ask any entrepreneur about their latest business venture. Ask them their monthly recurring revenue, their net profit margin, their customer acquisition costs.
They know it instantly.
Down to the decimal point. They are obsessed with tracking those metrics. But then ask that same hyper-analytical person their hemoglobin A1C, which is just a simple 3-month average of their blood sugar control. Ask them their free testosterone level or their C-reactive protein level, a key measure of systemic inflammation, and you just get a blank stare. They have no idea. But your health, your physical body, that's the vehicle. It's the vehicle that drives every other metric in your life, your business success, your relationship, your ability to generate wealth. Yet we prioritize tracking business data over tracking the data of our own temple, the very thing carrying us through life. It makes no sense.
Let's touch on cognitive issues for a sec, specifically how you redefine things like ADD and ADHD. You really push back against that traditional deficit model.
Yeah, we absolutely have to change the language if we want to understand the root cause and find real solutions. ADD and ADHD are, in my view, and based on the underlying physiology we see, grossly mischaracterized most of the time. They aren't attention deficit disorders. The person doesn't lack the ability to pay attention. They're attention overload disorders. The person lacks the physiological capacity to quiet an overactive mind. Their brain is constantly trying to track too many things at once. Sensory inputs, stray thoughts, internal chatter. It's trying to pay attention to everything simultaneously, and it gets overwhelmed.
Okay, so if the core problem is actually overload, then the standard approach of using stimulants, amphetamines to further rev up the central nervous system, that seems fundamentally counterproductive in the long run, doesn't it?
That's the logical conclusion, absolutely. If we correctly identify it as an overload disorder, then the fix isn't more stimulation. The fix is providing the brain with the specific raw materials it needs to downregulate itself, to manage metabolic waste efficiently, and to quiet that constant flood of catecholamines, those stress hormones and excitatory neurotransmitters that are keeping it buzzing.
And the beauty of this approach, you suggest, is in its simplicity. Getting back to what normal actually feels like. We often don't even realize how poorly we're functioning until we fix that core issue.
We genuinely have no clue how good normal is supposed to feel until we find that one missing raw material, the one thing our specific system is crying out for, and put it back. And often it comes down to the absolute basics. Think about it. Human life requires about 72 minerals, 16 of which are deemed absolutely essential. We need 2 essential fatty acids, the omegas. We need 8 essential amino acids, the building blocks of protein. It is absolutely staggering, truly staggering, how many people are walking around clinically deficient in these fundamental, non-negotiable components before they even start thinking about exotic super supplements or trying fancy biohacking techniques. Start with the basics. Do the soil test first. Find out what your fundamental deficiencies are, address those, and then just watch the body's incredible ability to correct itself.
Okay, so moving from that broad deficiency idea to our individual blueprint. You mentioned blood work gives us a snapshot of right now, but for the lifelong roadmap, we need genetics. Why do you think every single person should seriously consider getting a genetic methylation test done at least once in their life?
Think of a genetic methylation test as your personal operations manual. It's the ultimate instruction booklet for your body. It reveals, with incredible precision, exactly which raw materials, which specific vitamins, which amino acids your body can successfully convert into their usable active forms, and crucially, which conversion pathways are broken or slowed down due to your unique genetics. Now, you can't fix the gene itself, right? Your DNA is your DNA. But what you can do, very effectively, is bypass that broken function. You can supplement with the exact end product that the broken pathway was supposed to create. This is the absolute cutting edge of personalized medicine. It takes the guesswork out completely.
Let's define methylation because it sounds pretty complex, maybe intimidating. You described it as a critical assembly line.
Yeah, it sounds complicated, but the concept is fairly simple. Think of methylation as the body's main chemical on-off switch, or maybe like a tiny delivery truck. It involves attaching a very small molecule, 1 carbon atom and 3 hydrogen atoms, called a methyl group, onto another molecule. This attachment either turns the target molecule on so it can do its job, or it tags it off for disposal or conversion into something else. This process is happening billions upon billions of times every single second in every cell of your body. It's fundamental to everything. Let's use the B vitamin folate as a classic example. You eat spinach, other leafy greens, you get folate. Great. But your body can't use folate directly. It needs to go through a series of conversion steps to turn that folate into the active usable form called methylfolate. Now, this methylfolate is incredibly important because it's essential for detoxifying and downregulating an inflammatory amino acid called homocysteine. It helps convert homocysteine into beneficial methionine, which is key for things like producing calming neurotransmitters and protecting your DNA. So if that critical conversion step from folate to methylfolate fails or slows down because of your genetics, everything downstream gets messed up. Your mood, your energy levels, even your cardiovascular health can be compromised.
And this leads right into the most common genetic hiccup on that assembly line, the MTHFR gene mutation, which you affectionately nicknamed the motherfucker gene.
Yeah, MTHFR stands for methylene-tetrahydrofolate reductase. Bit of a mouthful. But yeah, the motherfucker gene is fitting because it causes so many issues for so many people, often without them realizing it. A shocking number. Current estimates are around 44% of the global population has some form of this mutation. That means almost half of us have a significant slowdown on this absolutely crucial biochemical assembly line. What it represents fundamentally is a simple, but often quite drastic, inability to properly convert synthetic folic acid, which is added to many processed foods, or even natural folate from food, into that vital, biologically active form, methylfolate. This isn't some rare disorder. It's a massive public health issue hiding in plain sight.
And you highlighted the critical difference between folic acid, the synthetic stuff, and methylfolate, the active form, especially when it comes to public health advice like preventing neural tube defects in pregnancy.
This is so fundamental and massively misunderstood. We fortify common foods, bread, cereals, pastas with synthetic folic acid. The intention is good, but here's the problem. If you're one of the 44% with an MTHFR mutation, your body struggles, sometimes mightily, to process that synthetic folic acid. It can actually build up in your bloodstream as unmetabolized folic acid, which some research suggests might even bind to the cellular receptors where methylfolate is supposed to dock. potentially blocking the small amount of active methylfolate your body is managing to produce. And here's the kicker. It is methylfolate, the fully converted active form, not folic acid, that is required by the body to prevent neural tube defects during pregnancy. So for almost half the population, consuming those fortified foods might be doing very little good and could potentially even be causing harm by blocking the active form, unless they are specifically supplementing with the already converted methylfolate.
So the fix isn't trying to force the broken gene to work harder, it's just giving the body the finished product it needed all along.
Exactly. You bypass the broken step entirely. You can't change your genes, right? But you can easily and relatively inexpensively supplement directly with the active form, L-methylfolate. You're just giving the body the precise tool it needs, the one it can't make efficiently for itself. It's a targeted, elegant solution for a fundamental genetic bottleneck.
Okay, let's pivot now to another key gene you mentioned, the one often lurking behind generalized anxiety and that tendency to worry, the COMT gene. This ties directly into our stress response, right?
Right. COMT stands for catecholomethyltransferase, another mouthful. Think of this enzyme, COMT, as the brain's cleanup crew, or maybe the traffic controller for your stress chemicals. And its job is pretty specific. It transfers one of those methyl groups, that chemical off switch we talked about, onto molecules called catecholamines and catecholamines. These are the big guns of stress. Norepinephrine, epinephrine, which most people know as adrenaline, and also dopamine. These are the molecules that drive the fight or flight response.
And the key insight here for anxiety is that our brain, well, it isn't very good at telling the difference between a real immediate threat, like that shark attack fantasy you mentioned, and just worrying about a presentation tomorrow.
That's the physiological crux of so much anxiety. The brain is remarkably bad at distinguishing between a perceived threat and an actual physical threat. If you are literally facing someone with a knife, or if you are just lying awake in bed at 3 a.m., vividly imagining a terrible financial disaster. The initial physiological response is almost identical. The sympathetic nervous system kicks into high gear, flooding your body with those catecholamines. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate shoots up, blood pressure spikes, muscles tense, ready for action. Anxiety, that feeling of unease or impending doom without a specific trigger, is often simply the lingering physiological effect of having elevated levels of these stress chemicals still circulating in your system long after the threat, real or imagined, has passed.
And because COMT is the enzyme responsible for breaking down and clearing out these stress chemicals, if you have a genetic mutation that makes your COMT enzyme work slowly, you basically end up living in a more chemically agitated state.
Precisely. People with a common slow COMT gene mutation are the classic worriers. Their cleanup crew is slow. They are inefficient at clearing out those stress hormones and excitatory neurotransmitters like adrenaline and norepinephrine. So these chemicals hang around in their system for much longer periods. This directly results in that classic mind-awake, body-tired syndrome. They lie in bed exhausted. They can't fall asleep because their mind is just clicking, clicking, clicking through every random innocuous thought from the day, often catastrophizing small concerns into worst-case scenarios. They are physiologically wired for overthinking and rumination.
You observed that these worriers tend to operate at a much higher baseline level of alertness or stress, which makes them react much more strongly to everyday stressors.
Exactly that. Think of it like a volume knob. If a neurotypical person, someone with fast COMT, walks around most days at a baseline stress level of, say, 2 out of 10, the person with slow COMT, the worrier, might be walking around at a baseline of 6 or even 7 out of 10, just normally. So when a small stressor hits, maybe a bill is late, or they have minor disagreement with someone, it doesn't just nudge them from a 2 to a 4, no. It pushes them instantly from their baseline 6 or 7 up to an 8 or 9, sometimes even a 10. The emotional reaction feels completely disproportionate to the actual event because their system was already primed, already overloaded with adrenaline and norepinephrine that hadn't been cleared out efficiently.
So for someone wired like that, the solution isn't just, say, talk therapy alone because there's a real biochemical process happening. It's about giving their body the tools it needs to dismantle those internal stress signals more efficiently. What are those specific tools?
The solution lies in directly supporting that slow COMT enzyme, giving it the resources it needs to do its job better. Remember, COMT works by transferring a methyl group. So logically, we need to ensure the person has an abundant supply of methyl groups available. Where do those come from? Primarily the active forms of B vitamins. They are the key methyl donors. This means targeted supplementation, specifically with the methylated forms. Methylcobalamin, the active form of B12, and methylfolate, the active form of folate we discussed earlier. You're essentially hiring a super efficient, well-equipped cleanup crew to come in and quickly clear away that backlog of adrenaline and norepinephrine that's causing the traffic jam in the brain, keeping the mind racing and worried. It sounds simple, and it is, but this targeted nutritional intervention can radically, fundamentally change a person's ability to handle stress, quiet their mind, and achieve deep, restful sleep. It addresses the root biochemical imbalance.
Okay, this is fascinating. Your firm, by running literally thousands of these genetic tests each month, alongside these huge panels, 74 different biomarkers, CBC, lipids, hormones, nutrients, you must have amassed an unprecedented amount of data on what's actually going wrong in the population. If you had to distill all that data down, what are the absolute top 3 essential biomarkers that everyone, regardless of how healthy they think they are, should be tracking?
Yeah, the volume of data is immense, and the patterns become incredibly clear. If you really want to be data-driven about your health, not just guessing, focus relentlessly on these 3 areas. They are by far the most foundational predictors of long-term health span, quality of life, and ultimately mortality risk.
Okay, number 1, the glycemic profile, our basic relationship with sugar and insulin.
This is ground zero for most chronic inflammatory diseases that plague modern society: cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, many cancers, metabolic syndrome. It often starts here. The complete glycemic profile requires tracking 3 specific markers: fasting glucose, your blood sugar after an overnight fast; hemoglobin A1C, often called HbA1c, which gives you a 3-month rolling average of your blood sugar control; and crucially, often missed, is fasting insulin. We are seeing metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, the precursors to type 2 diabetes, appearing in increasingly younger and younger populations. It's truly an epidemic.
Why is tracking the insulin level itself so vital, especially looking at it relative to the blood sugar number?
Because high fasting insulin, even if your fasting glucose looks normal, is the absolute earliest warning sign of metabolic dysfunction. It signals the very beginning of insulin resistance. What's happening is your cells are starting to ignore the insulin signal. So the pancreas, trying to compensate, has to pump out more and more insulin just to try and force the glucose into the cells. This state of chronically high insulin, called hyperinsulinemia, sets off a devastating cascade of negative effects throughout the body, long before your blood sugar actually rises into the pre-diabetic or diabetic range.
And that downstream cascade directly impacts things like cholesterol and heart disease risk, right? Which often leads doctors to treat the symptom, the high cholesterol, instead of the root cause, the high insulin.
Absolutely, 100%. Chronically high insulin levels actively block your body's ability to burn fat for energy, fatty acid metabolism. This directly leads to elevated triglycerides in your blood, and often it also drives up levels of small, dense LDL cholesterol particles, the kind most associated with plaque buildup in arteries. These high triglycerides and bad cholesterol are then flagged by conventional medicine as primary risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and the go-to solution is often a statin drug. But the deep insight from the data is crystal clear. If you fix the root cause, the insulin resistance, bringing down those chronically high insulin levels through diet and lifestyle changes, you positively affect the entire downstream cascade. Very often, triglycerides and cholesterol levels will normalize beautifully without ever needing heavy lipid-lowering medication. You treated the fire, insulin resistance, not just the smoke, high cholesterol.
Okay, essential biomarker number 2, the full hormone panel.
Yes. And we need to look beyond just the basic testosterone or estrogen levels. Specifically, you want to track your active hormones, like free testosterone, your DHEA levels. DHEA is a crucial precursor hormone, often linked to vitality and stress resilience, and also your sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG, which affects how much of your hormone is actually available for your cells to use. A key learning, a really important one from our massive data set, is that hormone deficiencies, especially in people under, say, 50 years old, are often not primarily failures of the endocrine system itself, like the testes or ovaries suddenly failing. Much more frequently, they're nutrient-driven. We see time and time again that simply optimizing foundational nutrient levels, particularly vitamin D3, and ensuring adequate DHEA production, which itself relies on nutrients, can often restore hormone levels back to an optimal youthful range without ever needing to introduce exogenous hormones like testosterone replacement therapy, which carries risks like suppressing your body's own natural production long-term. Fix the foundations first. Got it. And number 3, basic foundational nutrient deficiencies. This is about checking for the most common denominator problems, the ones that are frequently missed in a standard surface-level physical exam. We're talking specifically about vitamin D3, magnesium, potassium, and vitamin B12. Honestly, before anyone spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on fancy anti-aging molecules or complex biohacking protocols, you absolutely must ensure the engine has its essential oil and fuel. Getting these 4 basics right is the ultimate high-leverage health intervention. It's where you get the most bang for your buck, health-wise.
Let's drill down on a specific, really interesting finding you mentioned that connects directly to one of the most common chronic conditions out there, high blood pressure or hypertension. You found a potential nutrient fix for the vast majority of cases that doctors often label idiopathic, meaning they don't know the cause.
Yes, this is probably one of the most frustrating examples of where conventional thinking often misses the mark, largely because the system isn't set up to look for nutritional root causes first. Current estimates are that a staggering 85% of all hypertension cases are labeled essential, or idiopathic basically. We don't know why you have high blood pressure. Our data, however, shows a very strong link between high levels of homocysteine, that inflammatory amino acid we talked about earlier in the context of methylation and cardiovascular risk, including hypertension. What happens is when homocysteine levels rise, often due to deficiencies in the B vitamins needed to break it down, like B6, B12, and folate, it acts as a direct irritant to the lining of your blood vessels. This irritation causes the smooth muscle within the artery walls to constrict, to tighten up. Think of it like making the water pipe narrower in a fixed plumbing system. If the volume of water, blood, and the pump pressure, heart, stay the same, but the pipes get narrower, what happens to the pressure inside those pipes?
It has to go up.
It has to go up. That's hypertension.
So in many of these idiopathic cases, the primary issue might not even be the heart itself working too hard, but rather a constriction of the entire vascular system caused by this inflammatory compound, homocysteine, that the body simply can't clear out efficiently because it lacks the right nutrient cofactors.
That's exactly what the data strongly suggests for a huge percentage of that 85%. It's fundamentally a nutrient deficiency issue manifesting as high blood pressure, not necessarily a primary heart pathology. The body lacks sufficient methyl donors, B vitamins, essentially acting as the cleanup crew to effectively break down and recycle homocysteine. And the observed results in practice were stunning. From processing thousands and thousands of patient records where we tracked homocysteine and implemented protocols, we found that by simply supplementing patients with the amino acid trimethylglycine, TMG, which is a very potent methyl donor, it directly provides those needed methyl groups we could reliably bring elevated homocysteine levels down. And in literally thousands of documented cases, as homocysteine levels fell, blood pressure normalized, often within a relatively short period, allowing many to reduce or even eliminate their blood pressure medications. It begs the question, why would we default to lifelong medication for 85% of hypertension cases before checking for and correcting this simple, easily modifiable nutrient deficiency and its related inflammatory marker? This is the power of using comprehensive data to challenge long-held assumptions.
Okay, let's bring it back to that idea. If you pulled 100 random people off the street today, based on the patterns in your massive data set, what are the absolute most frequent, undeniable deficiencies you'd expect to find?
The patterns are incredibly consistent, almost depressingly so. Here's what you'd almost certainly find in that random group of 100 people. Number 1, overwhelmingly, is vitamin D3 deficiency. We see clinical deficiency levels below 30 ngml in approximately 50% of the population, and insufficiency levels below optimal, say 50-70 ngml is even higher. Darker skin complexions are at even higher risk due to melanin-blocking UV absorption. D3 is arguably the single most important nutrient, period. It's actually a prohormone made by the body. It acts like a hormone, and virtually every single cell in your body has a receptor for it. The consequences of deficiency are massive. A severely compromised immune system, increased risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. And significantly, something often missed is that prolonged severe D3 deficiency can present with symptoms that perfectly mimic serious autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, severe joint pain, stiffness, muscle aches, profound fatigue, systemic malaise. Fixing D3 is often the simplest, most profound fix for maybe half the population walking around feeling lousy. Number 2 would be vitamin B12 deficiency or insufficiency. The vast majority of people we test are running with suboptimal levels, often under 500 ngdl. For optimal cognitive function, energy production, and neurological health, you really want levels up closer to 1,000 or even 1,500 ngdl. Low B12 contributes massively to fatigue, brain fog, and mood issues. Number 3, easily, is hormone deficiencies or imbalances. Somewhere between 25% and maybe even 40% of the adult population, depending on age, are likely outside the optimal range for key hormones like testosterone, estrogen, or DHEA. And again, as we discussed, this is often tied back to those foundational nutrient issues, particularly D3 and DHEA precursors, not necessarily a primary gland failure, especially in younger folks. And number 4, the rates of prediabetes or full-blown insulin resistance are just shockingly, absolutely epidemic. It's terrifying. And this isn't just hitting people who eat tons of obvious sweets like candy and soda. It's being driven relentlessly by the ubiquitous consumption of high glycemic processed carbohydrates that just flood the system with glucose way too quickly. Things like white flour products, bread, pasta, bagels, white rice, most commercial breakfast cereals, white potatoes, especially processed forms like fries and chips. People often don't realize that metabolically, eating a bagel or a bowl of white rice is functionally very similar to eating a packet of sugar in terms of the rapid blood sugar spike and subsequent insulin surge it causes. This leads to chronic insulin resistance over time, even in people who might appear relatively thin or consider themselves health conscious.
That really is the powerful, maybe paradigm-shifting takeaway from your experience, isn't it? That correcting what seem like simple nutrient inputs, getting D3 levels up, ensuring enough B12, maybe using TMG for homocysteine, can often resolve or dramatically improve conditions that were otherwise being diagnosed and treated as complex, potentially lifelong pathological diseases requiring serious medication.
That is the absolute core message I have dedicated my life to sharing now. We have to stop automatically equating complexity with effectiveness in medicine and health. Very, very often, what gets aggressively labeled as some complex idiopathic pathology is, at its root, nothing more than a simple, identifiable, and crucially correctable deficiency in a basic raw material. The human body possesses this incredible innate drive to heal and maintain balance. We just need to get out of its way and consistently provide it with the fundamental building blocks it requires to do its job. Find the missing piece, put it back, and let the body work its magic.
So after seeing firsthand the human cost predicted by the data and understanding these foundational deficiencies, you develop this philosophy of prevention. You call it the invisible fence. The idea is we need to proactively filter out the bad stuff and provide the good stuff before our body is forced to deal with the consequences.
That philosophy is absolutely paramount. We have to consciously create an invisible fence, a protective barrier around our internal environment, our temple. The choice is really quite simple when you frame it this way. Either we proactively filter the inputs for the temple, our body, or we inevitably force the temple itself to become the filter. Think about tap water, for example. If you drink unfiltered tap water day after day, your body, your liver, your kidneys, your cells has to expend precious metabolic energy filtering out the chlorine, the fluoride, the potential microplastics, the pharmaceutical residues, the heavy metals that might be present. Why force that constant low-grade toxic load onto your system when installing a simple water filter is relatively inexpensive and easy? You protect the temple by controlling the inputs. That's the invisible fence concept.
Okay, let's run through the 5 simple but absolutely foundational daily commitments you recommend based on this philosophy, starting with the very first thing you do upon waking, hydration.
Right. Commitment number 1, mineralize water upon waking. Before coffee, before anything else. Drink about 10 ounces of clean, filtered water with a pinch of high-quality sea salt dissolved in it. And crucially, we are not talking about standard white processed table salt sodium chloride, which is often stripped bare of its vital companion minerals and may even contain anti-caking agents. You need a full-spectrum, unrefined salt that's rich in trace minerals. Things like Celtic sea salt are good. My personal preference, because of its purity testing and mineral profile, is Baja Gold sea salt.
Like, why Baja Gold specifically, and why are those trace minerals so critical beyond just sodium?
Baja Gold is often preferred by practitioners because it undergoes rigorous third-party testing for contaminants like heavy metals, microplastics, and glyphosate, ensuring you're getting just the good stuff. But more importantly, a truly unrefined sea salt like Baja Gold contains not just sodium and chloride, but potentially all 91 naturally occurring trace minerals found in seawater. Things like boron, manganese, selenium, zinc, iodine, lithium, and dozens more. These trace minerals act as essential catalysts, spark plugs really, for virtually every single metabolic process in the human body. And we are chronically deficient in many of them because our modern agricultural soils are so depleted due to industrial farming practices. So adding a pinch of high-quality, full-spectrum sea salt to your morning water isn't just about electrolytes like sodium. It's about rehydrating your cells effectively after sleep, balancing your overall electrolyte profile, and ensuring those foundational trace mineral deficiencies are addressed first thing, every single day. Commitment number 2, omega-3 supplementation. Every single morning, take a high-quality omega-3 supplement, ideally one rich in both DHA and EPA, from fish oil or algae oil, or at least a general healthy fat supplement like MCT oil. These essential fatty acids are absolutely non-negotiable for brain health, maintaining fluid cell membranes, controlling inflammation systemically, and supporting cardiovascular health. Most modern diets are woefully deficient. Commitment number 3, your morning routine, Mother Nature basics. This is about incorporating 4 simple, powerful, free, and portable elements into the first hour or so of your day. Sunlight exposure, grounding, connecting with the earth, breath work, and ideally, a cold shower or cold plunge. These are non-negotiable foundational practices.
Okay, let's spend a bit more time on grounding or earthing. Because, let's be honest, to a lot of listeners, the idea of just touching the bare earth might sound a bit, well, woo-woo or spiritual poo-poo stuff, as you put it. But you insist the science behind this magnetism piece is real, measurable, and profound.
It absolutely does sound esoteric at first glance, I get that. But the underlying science is actually straightforward physics and physiology. We, as biological organisms, evolved over millions of years in constant direct contact with the Earth's surface, which carries a natural, subtle, negative electrical charge often referred to as a low gas current. Modern life has completely disconnected us. We spend, 97% of our time indoors, insulated from this natural charge by synthetic materials like rubber soles on our shoes, carpet, concrete floors, plastic. When you intentionally make direct skin contact with the earth standing barefoot on soil, grass, sand, even concrete if it's directly on the ground, you're literally completing an electrical circuit.
And what happens physiologically inside the body when you complete that circuit? What's the measurable effect?
Several crucial things happen. Firstly, you allow your body to discharge excess positive ions. Think of these as inflammatory free radicals into the earth, which acts as a massive reservoir for them. You are literally neutralizing the static electrical charge and inflammatory load that builds up in your body from metabolic processes and environmental exposures. But crucially, grounding also changes the electrical potential, the polarity within your body, specifically affecting something called the zeta potential of your red blood cells. If you were to look at a drop of your blood under a high-powered microscope before grounding, you'd likely see the red blood cells clumped together, sticking to each other like stacks of coins. This is called rouleau formation. And it happens partly because the cells carry a positive charge and attract each other. This clumping drastically reduces their surface area. Now, if you ground yourself for even just a few minutes, stand barefoot on the grass, and look at the blood again, you'll see dramatic change. Those red blood cells repolarize. They regain a stronger negative charge on their surface and begin to actively repel each other.
Ah, like those eggs sliding around in a bowl of oil, the analogy you used.
Exactly like that. They spread out beautifully. This massively increases the total surface area of the red blood cells available for critical functions, picking up oxygen in the lungs, delivering nutrients to tissues, and perhaps most importantly, efficiently eliminating metabolic waste products and toxins from the cells. It improves blood flow, reduces blood viscosity, helps detoxify the body, and it can even help shift the pH of the blood slightly towards a more alkaline state. Remember, pH actually stands for potential of hydrogen, which relates to electrical charge. By introducing the Earth's natural negative charge, you help restore the body's optimal charge balance, creating an environment less conducive to inflammation and disease. It's profound, simple physics with huge physiological benefits. Commitment number 4. Breath work. You need to consciously learn how to use the full capacity of your respiratory system, including the auxiliary muscles of respiration.
Not just shallow chest breathing.
Exactly. Shallow, unconscious chest breathing is often a sign of chronic stress, and it literally accelerates the aging process. Remember the fundamental principle. The absence of oxygen is the root of much disease. We need to maximize oxygen delivery to our tissues and, critically, also improve our body's tolerance to carbon dioxide, which signals the brain to release oxygen more readily. I strongly recommend incorporating a structured, deliberate breathwork practice every single morning. Something like the Wim Hof method is excellent. 3 rounds of 30 rapid, deep breaths, followed by an extended breath hold after the final exhale. This practice massively alkalizes the blood acutely, trains your autonomic nervous system to handle stress better, improves focus, and builds resilience.
And the final commitment, number 5, isn't about a physical action, but about mindset and building self-trust.
That's right. Commitment number 5 is simple but powerful. Consistency in keeping small promises to yourself. We often lose self-confidence and self-efficacy, not because we fail at some huge, audacious goal, but because we consistently break the small daily internal promises we make to ourselves. I'll work out today. I'll go to bed early tonight. I'll do my breath work in the morning. When you consistently keep these small, manageable, portable promises, like committing to doing those 3 rounds of breath work within 30 minutes of waking up, no matter what, you build a foundation of self-trust. You prove to yourself that you can rely on yourself. That consistency in small things is the bedrock for having the confidence and discipline to tackle the larger goals in life. It builds self-efficacy from the ground up.
All right, so we've covered those foundational five. Now let's move into some of the more advanced but still data-backed tools that can really help optimize performance right down at the cellular level. You're a strong proponent of red light therapy, also known as photobiomodulation. Can you explain the precise mechanism? How does shining specific wavelengths of light, usually between 600 and 1,000 nanometers from panels or beds, actually work?
This is where we get into directly optimizing the power plants of our cells, the mitochondria. Red light therapy is fascinating because it doesn't primarily work by generating heat like an infrared sauna might. Instead, specific wavelengths of red and near-infrared light penetrate through the skin and into the cell, where they interact with a specific component inside the mitochondria called cytochrome C oxidase. Think of this as a key enzyme in the mitochondrial energy production line, the electron transport chain. Under conditions of stress, illness, or poor diet, a tiny gas molecule called mitochondrial nitric oxide, MNO, can bind to this cytochrome C oxidase enzyme.
Okay, and why is that bad? Why is kicking out that MNO so crucial?
Because when mitochondrial nitric oxide binds there, it effectively acts like a plug in the engine. It blocks oxygen from docking onto cytochrome C oxidase, which is a necessary step to keep the energy production cycle running efficiently. It gums up the works. What red and near-infrared light does at these specific wavelengths is it literally knocks that MNO molecule off its binding site on cytochrome C oxidase. It kicks the plug out. This single action allows oxygen to flood back in and bind properly, restarting and dramatically optimizing the entire energy production process within the mitochondria.
The result?
The production of cellular energy, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, can increase by as much as 16 times in a single respiratory cycle, going from maybe 2 units of ATP per cycle in a stress state up to 36 units in an optimized state.
Wow, 16 times more energy potential.
In potentially trillions of cells simultaneously. Imagine giving every cell in your body 16 times more energy to do its job, eliminating waste, repelling DNA damage, regenerating tissues, fighting inflammation. That's why we see such profound and wide-ranging benefits from consistent red light therapy. Everything from faster wound healing and joint repair to improved skin health, reduced pain, and better muscle recovery. It's turbocharging the cellular engines.
And sticking with light for a moment, you also emphasize the critical importance of getting natural sunlight exposure first thing in the morning, tying back to that morning routine.
Absolutely non-negotiable. This is different from the targeted therapy, but equally important. Exposing your skin and, critically, your bare eyes without sunglasses, glasses or contacts if possible, to natural unfiltered sunlight during the first 45 minutes or so after sunrise is key for setting your body's master clock. During this specific early morning window, the spectrum of sunlight is unique, contains very little, if any, damaging UVA or UVB radiation. Instead, it's rich in beneficial blue light and also some red light frequencies. This specific light profile hits specialized photoreceptors in your retina, called melanopsin receptors, which send a direct signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, in your brain. That's your master circadian clock. Getting that bright light signal early tells your brain definitively, day has started. This optimally suppresses melatonin production from the night before and triggers the healthy morning cortisol spike needed for energy and alertness. It synchronizes your entire hormonal rhythm for the next 24 hours. Your sleep quality tonight effectively starts the moment you wake up and expose your eyes to that first light.
Okay, shifting from light to water, hydrogen water. This involves using a special generator to infuse hydrogen gas into cold water, often under pressure. Why go to that trouble? What's the therapeutic benefit that adding hydrogen gas provides?
Hydrogen gas, H2, offers unique therapeutic benefits, primarily because it is the smallest molecule in the entire universe. Its tiny size allows it to easily diffuse across cell membranes and, importantly, cross the blood-brain barrier, reaching areas that many other antioxidants or supplements can't access readily. Functionally, hydrogen acts as a selective antioxidant. This is key. Unlike some broad-spectrum antioxidants that can neutralize both harmful and potentially beneficial free radicals, which cells sometimes use for signaling, hydrogen gas seems to preferentially target and neutralize only the most damaging cytotoxic free radicals like the hydroxyl radical, while leaving the beneficial ones alone.
And you mentioned the scientific backing for this is actually quite substantial.
It really is. People are often surprised. If you look at resources like the Molecular Hydrogen Institute or websites like hydrogenstudies.com, you'll find well over 1,350 peer-reviewed scientific papers, including numerous human clinical trials investigating the effects of hydrogen gas. The research consistently shows therapeutic potential across a wide range of areas. Hydrogen gas has been shown repeatedly to reduce oxidative stress and systemic inflammation, significantly improve athletic recovery times and performance metrics, enhance the absorption and efficacy of other supplements, and critically reduce neural inflammation. This makes it one of the most promising interventions available today for supporting cognitive health, brain recovery, and overall cellular resilience. Many experts consider hydrogen-rich water to be simply the best, most therapeutic type of water you can put into the human body.
All right, finally in the section, we have to touch on the massive cultural phenomenon right now. Ozempic and the related semaglutide or tirzepatide peptides. They clearly offer incredible benefits in the right context, but you warned they come with significant risks if used improperly, particularly just for cosmetic weight loss. What's the appropriate use case versus the vanity trap? Look, these GLP-1 receptor agonist peptides, semaglutide, sold as Ozempic for diabetes, Wegovy for weight loss, and the newer, often more potent tirzepatide, Mounjaro Zepbound, are genuinely effective, often life-changing tools for their intended populations.
Yeah.
Primarily individuals with type 2 diabetes struggling with blood sugar control, or those suffering from morbid obesity where lifestyle changes alone haven't been enough to manage metabolic dysfunction and overwhelming food cravings. In those contexts, they can be fantastic. However, when they are used off-label, purely for cosmetic weight loss, in individuals who are maybe just moderately overweight or simply want to lose that last 10, 15 pounds, that's where the potential downsides become really significant and need careful management. Resistance training specifically becomes absolutely non-negotiable.
Why the urgent emphasis on resistance training, lifting weights, when someone is using semaglutide for weight loss?
Because of the very real risk of significant lean body mass loss, muscle loss. Studies have shown that on these drugs, particularly without concurrent resistance training, up to 40%, even 50% in some cases, of the total weight loss can actually be precious lean body mass, muscle tissue, not just fat. Muscle is your metabolic currency. It dictates your basal metabolic rate, your insulin sensitivity, your long-term ability to maintain weight loss, your functional strength as you age. Losing significant muscle mass is devastating for long-term health and actually makes future weight regain more likely. So if someone is using these compounds, especially for cosmetic reasons, our clinical approach insists they pair it with aggressive, progressive resistance training several times a week. And often, we strongly recommend concurrently using growth hormone secretagogue peptides like sermorelin or ipamorelin.
Okay, and what's the specific role of sermorelin in that context? Why add another peptide?
Sermorelin works by stimulating the pituitary gland to produce and release more of the body's own natural growth hormone, GH. Growth hormone plays a crucial role in preserving and building lean muscle tissue and also helps with fat metabolism. So using sermorelin alongside semaglutide acts as a powerful muscle protective strategy. It helps ensure that the weight being lost is primarily fat mass, while preserving, or even potentially building, metabolically active muscle tissue. Without this kind of protective measure, the patient risks not only losing muscle but also experiencing other unpleasant side effects, sometimes associated with rapid weight loss or the drug's mechanism, such as the paralytic gut phenomenon, significantly slowed gastric emptying, causing persistent nausea, vomiting, and constipation, and the much talked about aesthetic issue known as Ozempic face.
Right, where the rapid fat loss affects facial structure.
Exactly. The aggressive metabolism of the subcutaneous fat pads in the cheeks and around the eyes can lead to a prematurely sunken, hollowed out, aged appearance. So the takeaway is, if you're going to use a powerful tool like semaglutide, you absolutely must use the appropriate protective tools alongside it, especially resistance training and potentially muscle-sparing peptides, to mitigate the risks and optimize the long-term outcome.
As we start to tie all these threads together, the hard data, the genetics, the nutrients, the lifestyle factors, let's revisit something profound that emerged from the mortality data you worked with. It wasn't just about biochemistry. It was deeply about human connection, community, and relationships.
Oh, absolutely. The life expectancy data was starkly, undeniably clear on this point. Isolation is a massive, quantifiable comorbidity factor. It's as dangerous as smoking or obesity, maybe even more so in some cases. If you wanted a hypothetical scenario to reliably cut a human being's remaining life expectancy roughly in half, regardless of their current health status or genetics, the data suggested the most effective way would be to put them into profound, chronic isolation. We saw the tragic real-world evidence of this constantly in the data, particularly in the elderly, with phenomena like broken heart syndrome or caregiver syndrome. When one long-term partner died, the surviving partner often followed with surprising, statistically significant rapidity. The physiological stress, the cortisol dysregulation, the inflammation triggered by profound grief, loneliness, and social isolation was measurable and demonstrably accelerated mortality, even in individuals who were otherwise relatively healthy before the loss. And this effect wasn't limited to the elderly. Social isolation is a major risk factor at younger ages, too.
And fascinatingly, this principle seems to extend right down to the level of our individual cells.
It really does. We often forget in our reductionist approach that cells themselves don't exist in isolation within the body. They exist in complex communicating communities. When researchers isolate cells in a petri dish to study them, a common practice in biomedical research, they often assume those cells will behave exactly the same way as they do within the intricate network of a living organism. But we know that's not true. A cell's behavior, its gene expression patterns, its metabolic functions, even its lifespan, can change dramatically when it's removed from its native community, separated from the signals and interactions with its neighboring cells. Community, connection, interaction. These are fundamental biological principles that operate from the microcosm of the cell right up to the macrocosm of human society. We are wired for connection, physiologically and psychologically.
And closely related to community and connection is that essential concept of purpose, especially as people move beyond their primary working years. You mentioned the data showing mortality often accelerates post-retirement.
Yes, this is another incredibly consistent finding, both in the insurance mortality data and in anthropological research, particularly from the blue zones. When you look at the blue zones, those pockets around the world with the highest concentration of healthy centenarians, yes, diet and lifestyle matter. But perhaps the most consistent thread running through all of them, arguably even more consistently protective than any specific dietary pattern, is the combination of continued physical mobility well into older ages, and crucially, a persistent sense of purpose, what the Okinawans call ikigai, or reason to get out of bed in the morning. In these traditional blue zone societies, things like retirement homes or assisted living facilities were virtually non-existent. Elders typically lived within the extended family structure until the very end of their lives. And critically, they almost always retained a small, defined daily role or task that contributed to the household or community. Maybe Grandpa was responsible for sharpening tools, or Grandma tended the small vegetable garden that fed the family. That simple daily requirement to contribute, to be needed, to have a purpose, seems to be profoundly protective against the rapid physical and cognitive decline often seen after retirement in Western societies, where purpose is frequently tied solely to one's career. When that career ends, the sense of purpose can evaporate, and health often follows.
Let's just take a moment to reflect on your own personal journey here. You described moving from a life intellectually focused on predicting mortality, perhaps somewhat detached from the human element, to now dedicating yourself to service and prevention, largely because of what you witnessed from behind that glass wall.
Yeah, it was a profound shift. For the first 20 years of my career, I was, by external measures, very successful. Academically successful, financially successful. But looking back, I realized I was also deeply unauthentic in many ways. I was intellectually processing this incredibly sensitive mortality data, but I had allowed myself to become detached, to forget the real human beings, the real lives and families represented by those numbers on the spreadsheet. Witnessing the helplessness, the preventable tragedies unfolding behind that glass wall, feeling that profound ethical conflict and inability to intervene. It broke down that detachment. It forced me to confront the human cost, and it gave me a new mission, a purpose. Now, I genuinely wake up every single day feeling incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to try and make a tangible difference, to actively work to counter those grim statistical patterns that predict premature death by arming people, empowering the masses with simple, actionable, data-backed preventative knowledge. It's been a transition, really, from focusing on personal success to striving for significance, driven entirely by the profound realization that we actually have far more power than we think to change these predicted timelines, often through very simple means. #tagoutro.
Wow. This deep dive has really woven together some incredible threads from the cold, hard data of the life insurance world to our intricate personal genetics, right down to the surprisingly simple nutritional inputs required for optimal human performance. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that revelation. What often gets labeled and treated as complex, inevitable pathology might actually just be, at its root, a straightforward, correctable nutrient deficiency waiting to be identified.
That's precisely it. And my final message, really, is one of empowerment through simplicity. Look, I know this approach sometimes draws scrutiny, often from those who perhaps benefit from keeping things complex. But my mission now is clear. It's to educate the masses, not just the already woke biohackers who have access to the most extensive tests and equipment. You, the listener, now possess the core insights derived from analyzing millions of lives and deaths. Focus your energy, your attention, your resources on the simple, high-leverage, easily modifiable risk factors we've discussed today. Get your vitamin D3 levels checked and optimized. Know your B12 status. Understand and manage your glycemic control, your relationship with sugar and insulin. Consider basic methyl donors like TMG if you suspect high homocysteine might be playing a role in things like blood pressure or mood. These fundamental inputs are what truly move the needle on your long-term health span, your daily energy, your cognitive function, and ultimately your life expectancy. Start there.
That's such a critical summation. The real power often lies in simplicity and specificity, driven by data. And as we always do, we end the deep dive by posing a challenge left by our previous guest. This one is a powerful quote from Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. The question is, what is the change you want to see, and how will you be it?
That resonates deeply. For me, the change I want to see is simple yet profound. It's millions upon millions of people all around the globe living healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives, free from the unnecessary suffering and limitations imposed by preventable chronic diseases. And the way I strive to be that change is by relentlessly continuing to get this critical data-backed health message out to the public, by translating the complex science into actionable steps, by teaching people how to take command of the data for their own temple, their own health. We have to lead by example and share the knowledge.
So the final challenge we leave with you, our listener, armed with this new understanding of your potential mortality factors, the sheer prevalence of common deficiencies, and the power of simple interventions. What is the one simple deficiency you'll check, the one baseline biomarker you'll track, the one foundational practice you'll implement first, starting today, to begin optimizing your own timeline? Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Can you even imagine spending 20 years predicting, like with chilling accuracy, the exact month someone was going to die? That really intense data is what we're digging into today.
Yeah, we're looking at the work of Gary Brecka. He's a human biologist who, well, he spent decades basically calculating mortality for life insurance companies.
And here's the really wild part from our source material. His team wasn't just predicting the year, but the month. I mean, that kind of accuracy is just, wow. It really shows how much these companies know.
It does.
But, okay, our mission today is to completely flip that. We want to use that same knowledge, not to predict death, but to help you live a longer, healthier life.
Exactly. Brecka's whole argument is that most chronic health problems, they don't just happen to us, they happen within us, usually because we're missing some key information about our own bodies.
It's true, isn't it? We track everything for our businesses, all the KPIs, the financials.
Right. But our own bodies, this incredibly complex system, we're mostly just guessing, flying blind. We need like a biological balance sheet, a map for our own temple, as he puts it.
Okay, so where does that map start? It seems like it has to cut through all the confusion, especially around supplements.
Yeah.
You hear about this miracle cure, that miracle molecule.
Yeah, he calls it the paralysis of analysis. People just start taking stuff, haphazardly because they heard it was good.
Right, supplementing just to supplement.
Exactly. And he has this great analogy from his botany background. If you see a yellow dying leaf on a tree, what does an amateur do? They spray the leaf, treat the symptom.
Okay.
But a real botanist, they test the soil, they look for the root cause. Maybe it's just missing nitrogen. Add the nitrogen, the whole plant gets healthy again. We need to stop spraying the leaf and start testing our own soil.
And that soil testing, when you look for the root of things like brain fog, bad sleep, retaining water, that general ooh feeling, it often points to one core process.
It often leads back to methylation.
Methylation, okay? What exactly is that?
So methylation is this huge, chain reaction in your body. It does everything from cleaning out your liver to actually building the chemicals your brain uses, your neurotransmitters. And if that system's broken, it means your body can't properly convert basic raw materials, like certain vitamins, into the form it actually needs to use.
I see.
Which is why Brecka argues, look, every single person should get a genetic methylation test just once. It basically shows you where your body has these built-in roadblocks.
And the most common roadblock, you said it affects a massive number of people.
Yeah, it's huge. It affects something like 44% of everyone globally. It's a gene mutation called MTHFR.
MTHFR.
Unofficially known as the motherfucker gene, yeah, because it can cause so many downstream issues.
Okay, so what's it doing or not doing?
Think of it like your body's B vitamin recycling center, especially for folic acid, the stuff in leafy greens, but also added to tons of processed foods.
Right.
If you have this MTHFR mutation, that recycling center is just It's slow. It struggles to turn folic acid into the form your body actually uses, which is methylfolate.
Oh, okay.
But the beauty of knowing this from the test is the fix is usually pretty simple. You don't change the gene, obviously. You just bypass the slow recycling center. You give the body the finished product, the methylfolate it needs. You supplement for the function.
That seems incredibly straightforward. If it's that simple, just switching from folic acid to methylfolate, why isn't this kind of genetic testing just like standard practice? It feels like we're letting almost half the population struggle unnecessarily.
Well, that's a bigger system question, isn't it? Conventional medicine often focuses on treating diseases after they show up, not necessarily optimizing health by fixing underlying nutrient issues. It's partly awareness, partly the system structure. But yeah, when you see how simple tweaks based on genetics can make such a difference, it is frustrating. Let's link this to something specific, like anxiety.
Okay, but not anxiety from like a stressful event. Right, more like that constant background hum of worry.
Exactly that. For a lot of people, that kind of chronic generalized anxiety isn't really psychological in origin. It can be purely physiological, driven by another gene mutation. This one's called COMT.
COMT, okay.
COMT, or catechol-methyltransferase. This gene basically codes for the enzyme that acts as your body's off switch for adrenaline and related neurotransmitters.
So if your off switch is slow, the adrenaline, the dopamine, those fight or flight chemicals, they just hang around longer.
Precisely. If you have the slow COMT variant, those stimulating chemicals, the catecholamines, they don't get cleared out efficiently. They stay elevated.
You feel wired.
You feel wired. You become that classic worrier. You're running at a higher baseline level of alertness all day. Maybe your body feels tired, but your mind is just racing, always thinking through possibilities, feeling that physical sense of unease or panic, all because of a chemical imbalance making your nervous system idle too high.
Wow. That really shows the power of knowing your genetics. But okay, for someone listening who maybe isn't ready for a full genetic workup, what are some simpler, maybe daily or yearly biomarkers they should keep an eye on? Like a basic dashboard.
Right. For a basic dashboard, Brecka highlights 3 key areas. First, what he calls the root of all evil, your glycemic profile.
Meaning blood sugar.
Blood sugar, yes. Specifically, track your glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, that's your 3-month average, and, crucially, your insulin levels. Chronically high blood sugar is just bad news. It causes inflammation, creates these nasty compounds called AGEs.
AGs.
Advanced glycation end the products. They basically make your tissues stiff and accelerate aging.
Yikes. Okay, so what's the really early warning sign in that glycemic profile?
Insulin sensitivity. You have to look at how much insulin your body is pumping out relative to your blood sugar level. If your insulin is creeping up, even if your glucose looks okay for now, that's often the first sign of metabolic syndrome.
And high insulin does more than just handle sugar, right?
Oh, yeah. High insulin actually blocks your body's ability to burn fat. It shuts down fatty acid metabolism. That leads directly to things like high triglycerides and ups your cardiovascular risk significantly.
Okay, so glycemic profile first. What else?
Second, a basic hormone panel. He specifically points out looking at DHEA and also SHBG.
SHBG.
Sex hormone binding globulin. Think of it like a sponge. If your SHBG is too high, it soaks up your free, usable testosterone and estrogen. So your total hormone levels might look fine on a test.
But you don't feel fine because the active stuff is tied up.
Exactly. The free hormone isn't available, so you get all the symptoms of low hormones anyway. Low energy, low libido, that kind of thing.
Got it. High SHBG is like a hormone thief. And the third area?
Third is just basic nutrient deficiencies. Really focus on D3, magnesium, potassium, and B12. These are incredibly common. I mean, it's still wild that roughly half the population is clinically low in vitamin D3.
The sunshine vitamin. The only one we can make ourselves.
The only one. And yet deficiency is rampant.
And this brings us back to Brecka's time in the insurance world. He was seeing this data. People with low D3, high blood sugar, high SHBG, these common fixable things.
And his models were showing, clear as day, that these factors were predictors of earlier death, often by years.
That must have been incredibly difficult.
He talks about it very openly, that unjust insurance aspect. They had all this incredibly predictive data on things like obesity, prediabetes, anemia, factors driving early mortality. But legally, they couldn't do anything with it. They couldn't call the person and say, hey, fix your vitamin D.
Wow.
He said it felt like watching people walk blindly towards a cliff, and he couldn't shout a warning. He described it as sitting behind a thick glass wall, just watching blind people walk into traffic. That helplessness, that pain, that's what eventually pushed him out.
Yeah, you can see how that would create a powerful sense of purpose to actually use that knowledge to help.
Absolutely. It drove him to start his current wellness work.
Okay, let's pivot then to the actionable stuff. His 5 simple habits, based on all this data, things people can start doing. They seem to focus on, like, filtering what comes into the body.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, managing inputs. And it starts right when you wake up. Mineralized water.
Not just any water.
No, specifically water with trace minerals added back in. He suggests Baja Gold sea salt or Celtic salt. Unlike regular table salt, which is just sodium chloride, these contain dozens of trace minerals. Boron, manganese, selenium, things you lose overnight. It helps reset your whole fluid and electrical system for the day.
Okay, simple enough. What's next? This one sounds a bit out there, maybe. Grounded, like literally bare feet on the earth.
It sounds woo-woo to some, but the science he presents is fascinating. It's about electrical charge. The Earth has a natural negative charge.
Okay.
And our red blood cells also carry a negative charge, which is why they normally repel each other slightly, keeping them separated. But in modern life, we build up static charge. Things get sluggish.
So grounding discharges you.
Yes. You connect with the Earth's charge, and it basically increases the negative charge, the zeta potential, on each red blood cell. This makes them repel each other much more strongly.
So the visual he talked about, seeing blood under a microscope change, that's real. Going from clumpy to...
You're looking like eggs slithering around in a bowl of oil, as he put it. They separate dramatically.
And why does that matter?
More separation means way more surface area on each cell. More surface area means much better exchange, picking up oxygen, dropping off waste. It instantly improves circulation and cellular function at a fundamental level.
Wow. Okay, grounding. Makes sense when you put it like that. And related to oxygen, breath work.
Huge. We've talked about this idea before. The absence of oxygen is essentially the presence of disease, right?
Right.
Brecka points out that after about age 35, most of us stop using the extra muscles involved in deep breathing. We breathe shallowly up in our chest.
Which means less oxygen, more CO2.
Exactly. You retain CO2, you starve your tissues of oxygen, and that accelerates aging and invites problems. So doing deliberate breath work, like Wim Hof style or others, forces oxygen deep into your system, alkalizes the blood temporarily, and really feeds those cells. It combats cellular hypoxia.
Okay, now for the more techie habits. Red light therapy, photobiomodulation. What's the deal with shining red light around 600,000 nanometers on yourself?
This one's really cool. It sounds like sci-fi, but the mechanism is purely biological. That specific wavelength of light actually penetrates your skin, goes into your cells, and hits the mitochondria.
Cells power plants.
Right. Inside the mitochondria, there's usually a molecule called mitochondrial nitric oxide that can kind of clog up the works where oxygen needs to bind. Red light actually kicks that nitric oxide out.
It clears the docking station for oxygen.
Perfectly put. It clears the clog, oxygen can dock easily, and boom, energy production, ATP, becomes way more efficient, like up to 16 times more efficient.
16 times, and the benefits are?
Reduce inflammation is a big one, better blood vessel formation, angiogenesis. And yeah, anecdotally, people report things like improved eyesight. Joe Rogan mentioned seeing noticeable improvements with consistent use.
Interesting. Okay, and the last habit, hydrogen water. This involves like a special bottle that infuses hydrogen gas.
Yeah, using a generator to pump hydrogen gas into the water. The research here is growing incredibly fast. There's a resource, hydrogenstudies.com, that lists, I think, over 1,300 peer-reviewed studies now.
Wow. And what's the hydrogen gas doing?
It seems to act as a very selective, powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. It gets everywhere in the body easily. Studies show it helps reduce inflammation, can improve how well you absorb other supplements, and you'll notice a big difference in things like muscle soreness after workouts.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to some bigger cultural health topics he touched on. First, this massive wave of Ozempic and similar drugs like Wegovy, semaglutide.
Right. Developed for type 2 diabetes and severe obesity, but now, well, it's everywhere, often for vanity weight loss.
And Brecka flags some serious concerns, beyond just the intended use.
Absolutely. The drug works partly by slowing down how fast your stomach empties. In some cases, this can become extreme, leading to a condition sometimes called paralytic gut, where food just sits there way too long.
That sounds unpleasant.
To say the least. But maybe the bigger, more insidious issue is what kind of weight is lost. The studies suggest up to 50% of the weight dropped can be lean body mass, muscle.
Losing muscle is metabolically terrible, isn't it? It slows everything down long term. And that's where the Ozempic phase comes from, too.
Exactly. Losing muscle mass tanks your metabolism. And aesthetically, yes, that rapid fat loss, including the structural fat pads in the face, leads to that gaunt, aged look people call Ozempic face.
So the takeaway is this isn't a casual drug.
Not at all. If someone needs it for diagnosed medical reasons, fine. But it must be paired with serious strength training to preserve muscle, maybe even other peptides that protect muscle. Using it just to drop 15 pounds without addressing lifestyle. Very risky for long-term health. You're sacrificing your metabolic engine.
Okay. Switching from the cellular to the social. He also talked about the data on loneliness, the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah, and the data here is just stark. Being isolated, feeling disconnected, it literally cuts a person's life expectancy in half.
In half. That's staggering.
It is. We see physiological effects like in broken heart syndrome, where a spouse dies shortly after their long-term partner. That profound connection or lack thereof impacts us right down to the cellular level. Community isn't just nice to have. Biologically, it seems we need it.
It all connects back. Before we wrap up, we should touch on Gary's own story again. That pain he felt back in the insurance days.
Right, being behind that thick glass wall, knowing things but unable to help. That wasn't just a job frustration. It sounds like it was a deep source of pain.
And that pain became his purpose.
It really seems so. It's what propelled him to leave that career, even though it's likely very lucrative, and start a wellness company actually focused on applying the data to help people, to extend healthy lifespans. He turned that feeling of helplessness into a mission.
And it seems he's passing that mission on. He mentioned his kids are working with him now.
Yeah, both his adult children are working with him while pursuing doctorates in nursing. He made a really insightful point that you can't give your children passion, you can only try to inspire it. Seeing them choose that path must be incredibly rewarding.
It really ties into longevity too, doesn't it? Like the Blue Zones research.
Absolutely. Those centenarians, it's not just genetics or diet. They stay mobile, yes, but they have a strong sense of purpose. It might be small daily tasks contributing to family, community roles, but that sense of purpose is vital.
So as we usually do, we have a question left by the previous deep dive guest. This one quotes Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. What is the change you want to see? How did Brecka answer?
His answer really summed up his whole mission. He said he wants to see people live healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives. And the way he contributes to that change is by getting this message out, using data, understanding the body, taking control.
That's a perfect summary. What a deep dive. We covered so much, from realizing anxiety might be your adrenaline off switch being slow, to the fact that almost half of us might benefit from a simple B vitamin swap.
To just putting your feet on the grass, changing how your blood flows.
Exactly. The data isn't just about predicting outcomes, it's about giving you the power to change them.
It really is. It puts the control back in your hands. You just need that starting point, that information.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with today. If these relatively simple, often inexpensive nutrient deficiencies, things like low D3 or poor methylation, can masquerade as serious conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue, even high blood pressure, what single raw material might you be missing right now? What one thing could be holding your body back from optimal performance? Maybe it's time to go get the data and start really taking care of your own temple.